So, as I said, if we have time at the end of class, we may just sort of sit and work on this a little bit. What you're going to do here, right, is you're going to have to condense this down to 250 words.
Exactly?
Roughly. Let's just say if you go over 300, you're doing too much.
Ah.
So, you are going first. This is awesome. You are first going to give me a 250-word general summary of the whole thing, right? Now, because this is about 12 pages long, right, and 250 words is not very many words, you are going to have to be very, very selective, right? And only give me the information you think is actually most important for understanding what the hell a hobbit is. The second summary is going to track a single theme or pattern that you notice. Yes?
So the first one we're just describing what a hobbit is, and then the second one we're like picking out a theme of the story. So the first we're not actually describing the story itself.
No. Well, what I've given you here is actually not the story. It's like the little prologue to the Lord of the Rings that tells you what a hobbit is and a little bit about their history, right?
Like bright colors, they hate machines, and they're short and they eat a lot.
Yeah. That's a lot of it, right? Yeah. No, 250 words of that. But no, yeah, what you're going to give me first is you're going to tell me in general what this prologue tells you a hobbit is, right? You're going to give me the gist of it in 250 words. Then you are going to choose a single specific theme or pattern that you notice somewhere in this prologue. And you're going to give me a summary of that, right? Now the purpose of this, right, the point of learning how to summarize is to learn how to be selective with information, right? If you only have a small space in which to write something, right? If you only have 250 words to write, then you have to only select that information which is most important, yes? Most important to explaining to me, your ignorant reader, what a hobbit is, right? Did you have a question, Michaela? Let me get a hand up a second ago. No? Okay. All right, so does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, we'll probably, we'll work on some stuff today that ought to help you, particularly with part 2 of this. Mm-hmm.
What if you see more than like one theme?
Just focus on one.
Okay.
Even if you see more than one, just pick one that, just pick the one you find most interesting. Yep. Any other questions? All right, great. Then I want to start today just by warming our brains up a little bit, since it's been a week. So, what I want you to do with the block of text that is any minute now going to appear up on the projector screen, I want you to read this and tell me what kind of animal you think this describes and why. And if you are familiar with this particular block of text and you already know the answer, then don't say anything, right? Don't spoil it for anybody else, right? But yeah, just read this and tell me what animal you think this describes and why. Read the whole thing before coming to any conclusions. you think you figured something out, just speak up. Okay, yes, Slade.
Is it humans?
Why do you think it's a human being?
Mainly towards the end when it was like, in all my travels, so disagreeable animal.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we're pretty disagreeable.
All right. So yeah, so you are taking the the narrator's dislike of this creature as evidence that it's a human being. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but we're going to need more than that, right? What were you going to say, Alan?
I was gonna say like baboon or something.
Okay, why a baboon?
It was saying the part where it did not have any hair or anything on its butt, basically, and
hairless butt,
I was
yeah.
thinking baboon.
Okay. That is a prominent feature of a baboon, yes. But is there anything here that doesn't add up to baboon?
It says it doesn't have any hair on its body.
Yeah, the colors of the fur, and yeah, it doesn't have any hair over most of its body, right?
Yeah. And baboons do.
Yeah. The only place baboons are hairless are the ass and the face, right? Okay. Other theories here. What else have you guys got? And if you think it's either a human, if you think it's something somebody else has already said, that's okay. Just, provide further evidence, right?
I was gonna go with human too.
Okay.
Until they said the part about the hair.
Okay, which part about the hair, Michaela? What threw you off?
It's Janaya.
Oh, Janaya, I'm sorry. And you're Michaela. I'm sorry.
It was. Okay, yeah, when they said that they had the hair on the chin
Yeah.
and in a long ridge of hair down their back.
Uh-huh.
I don't think humans have, like, would it be talking about the hair on their head going down their back, or?
No, he's talking about like people having like hair growing on their spine.
Okay,
right?
so the thing too that made me think it was a human was
Mhm.
the fact that we have hair on our legs,
Okay.
underarms,
Mm-hmm.
and it is, I
Yeah.
guess that means vagina too, didn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And that's all to cover us from nature,
Uh-huh.
and hair on our head and chins and stuff.
Right.
All of that hair is to protect us. So
Right.
That's the reason I thought it was.
Okay, so you think given the places where this creature has hair, you think it's probably a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Other theories. What else do you guys think? Anything else that here suggests to you either a human being or something else?
I was gonna say a baboon too, but they're convincing me that it is human.
Okay.
I think my mind went to monkey or baboon because it said sitting in trees
Yeah.
is what
Yeah.
first got
Yeah,
me
that's
thinking.
what I was
Yeah.
thinking too.
Like an earlier human or something?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, we-
because it said
Mhm.
they're deformed.
Yeah, we had. He tells, one of the first things he says are they're singular and deformed, right? So are these creatures that he thinks are attractive?
No.
No.
Yeah, they're ugly creatures, right? And we see at the bottom here, he says, he had never met so disagreeable an animal, or one against which I naturally conceived so strong an antipathy, right? Does he like these creatures?
No.
No, they disgust him, right?
So like cavemen.
Yeah, I was gonna say caveman too.
Yeah, I mean, the creature that this describes, this is from Jonathan Swift's novel Gulliver's Travels. The creature that he describes, he calls a Yahoo. But context clues throughout this portion of the novel show us that Yahoos are essentially human beings, right? They are identical biologically to human beings. They live on an island in which human beings are a kind of servitor race, and hyper-intelligent horses are the dominant race.
What kind of book is this?
Okay,
Gulliver's Travels.
Yeah, it's about a ship's doctor who travels from every voyage this guy seems to go. He ends up getting shipwrecked someplace, and it's usually on some sort of island that ends up being a political allegory about his own home in England, right? But yeah, so the idea here is that human beings on this island, right, the island of the Houyhnhnms, the intelligent horses, are these sort of disgusting, brutish creatures with which he doesn't initially want to recognize any kind of kinship, right? We've already seen, he doesn't like these creatures. He doesn't want us to like these creatures. But by the end of this segment of the novel, right, he's been attacked by a Yahoo female, right? The Yahoos clearly recognize him as one of them. So what Swift has done here, right, is he's taken a familiar object, right, the human body, and by describing it in unfamiliar terms, right, he forces us to rely on context clues in order to figure out what it is he's talking about, right? Gulliver doesn't see a crowd of people wandering around in this field and sitting in trees. He sees a crowd of beasts. These beasts happen to be people, but the narrator here doesn't recognize them as such at first, right? And neither are we supposed to, right? So what we've done here is an exercise in what's called close reading. And close reading it's the central activity or one of the central activities in literary criticism, and it's a useful skill in just about any discipline, right? It's about sort of looking for patterns within a piece of text, right? Looking for clues within a piece of text that hint at something the text is not telling you outright, right? By paying close attention to details, right, you figure out that the creature being spoken of in this passage is a human being, not an ape, right? Except to the extent to which we can regard human beings as a species of hairless ape. Okay, so, right. What should you be looking for in anything that you read? And this, by the way, will help you with the homework assignment that I gave you on the Aztecs, right? The whole that Aztec philosophy article that you're supposed to do the second assignment on. A couple of things you want to look for, generally speaking. The first kind of pattern you want to try to locate is what's called a strand. Right, and a strand is a pattern of repetition and emphasis. Now, repetition is not always going to be exact repetition, right? Sometimes when we talk about repetition, what we mean are details that are simply related to each other, right? So, for example, Janaya, you figured out human here by paying attention to the placement of the hair on the creature, right? That's that's a strand. That's a pattern of repetition and emphasis. Slayton, you figured out human based on the sort of pattern of disgusted language that the author used here, right? So those would both be strands, right? Anywhere where you see sort of repetition and emphasis, that's going to be a strand. Now, is all repetition going to be meaningful repetition? No, there are certain sort of like words that will repeat that may just be sort of formulaic, right? For example, when you're reading a lot of ancient world literature, right? How many of you have read the Odyssey at some point? Okay, or at least seen a movie in class, right? There are a lot of passages in the Odyssey that repeat more or less exactly words, even like word for word previous passages, right? Now, what this is a relic of the epic's origins, right, as an oral poem that was initially passed down through word of mouth, right, before anybody bothered to write it down. So those kinds of repetitions aren't always going to be meaningful, right? Repetitions of just sort of ordinary everyday words are often not going to be meaningful. What you want to look for instead are patterns of imagery, patterns of description, in particular, things that don't seem to be related to the main plot. Right, so for example, if you're reading a short story about a wedding, and there are all these references to, say, prison. Right, now the story is then implying something, perhaps, about the institution of marriage, right? But it's not coming right out and saying it. And that is not, and that's, a strand that's not necessarily, determining the plot of the story, right? So what you want to look for are these sort of strands that imply things that the story doesn't quite say outright. So, for example, in this case, right, this creature is a human being, and human beings are disgusting. Yes? Yes. Okay, the other kind of pattern that you're going to want to look for, we call a binary. And a binary is a pattern of opposition. So you will often see in a text two opposing forces pushing against each other. Now, we like to think in binaries. We like to think in terms of paired opposites, right? So just as an exercise right now, can you think of some sort of pairs that we tend to think of as sort of existing in opposition to each other?
Apples
Light dark.
Pardon?
Apples and oranges.
Okay, yeah, apples and oranges, right? That's certainly, something that we tend to use to describe this very idea, right? Apples and oranges. I heard Alan say light and dark. Keep going, give me some more.
Life and death.
Life, death, good.
Cat and mouse.
Cat and house,
Cat and dog.
cat and dog.
Cats are opposites to everything.
Tall, short.
Tall, short,
Pretty ugly.
pretty, ugly.
What if you're pretty ugly?
That's not something.
Yes, those
Modern.
cancel each other out.
Ancient.
Modern, ancient, okay, good. So, the oppositions within a particular text aren't always going to be this obvious, right? How might we define the main binary we're working with in that Swift passage that I just gave you? What two things are being at least initially presented as opposite?
Animals in here.
Yeah, it's the human-animal binary, right? Now, what Swift is doing is breaking that binary down, right? He's taking that binary that we tend to think of humans and animals as separate sorts of things, right? And he's taking that and playing with that idea and trying to show us that, no, actually, human beings are animals, and pretty filthy and gross animals at that, right? So when you locate a binary like this in a text, then you need to try to figure out which side of the binary the text aligns itself with, right? Which side is it? It's going to value one over the other. It may also try, as Swift does here, right? It may also try to collapse that binary. It may also try to break the binary apart and actually try to combine the two things. A lot of this, by the way, comes out of study of mythology. This sort of whole binary idea. Just sort of to go off on a little side tangent here, because it's fun. So a lot of myth theorists believe that sort of human beings tend naturally to see the world in terms of binaries. And that these binaries actually make us uncomfortable and make us upset. And myth, is story. Myths are stories that we invent to try to resolve these opposites, these binaries, right? So to give you an example, because it's too late for you to drop the class at this point.
Not without academic penalty.
You can withdraw. You cannot drop. It's a different thing. There was a group of priests in ancient Rome they called themselves Galli. A gallus in Latin is a rooster. They worshipped a goddess whose cult had originated in what is now Turkey, called Cybele. And Cybele was a sort of generalized mother goddess type figure. Now, once a year, on a holiday that the Galli called the Dies Sanguinis, the Day of Blood, new initiates into the cult would take a whole lot of psychedelic mushrooms and ritually castrate themselves. Hence Day of Blood, right? Now, here's why, right? The ritual was sort of in imitation of this religion's central myth, right? Cybele, their mother goddess, had originated, according to the story, as a kind of hermaphroditic figure, right? Both male and female. And her male part had been ejected from her at some point in prehistory. And when she found it, the two kind of went mad, right? So the myth and the ritual practice associated with it are an attempt to resolve, right, to dissolve that conventional binary between male and female, right? If you study other myths, you will often see that they're often attempts to dissolve similar kinds of binaries, right? These similar kinds of oppositions that we find naturally in the world around us. I guess to make them easier to deal with or whatever, right? But yeah, so enjoy that. Take that home with you. Right. So third type of thing you want to look for in any given text is actually not a pattern at all. You also want to look for what are called anomalies.
Things that come out of the blue.
Yeah, things that just don't seem to fit, right? Nothing is in a text for no reason at all. Right, an anomaly is the sort of thing that makes you ask, like, what is this doing here? How did this end up in this text? And what does it mean, right? How do we interpret this? Now, we can actually think of all three of these things in terms of that Diego Rivera painting that we talked about on the first day, right? So we have strands in the top, right, where the workers, right, they're holding tools and, a sheaf of wheat, and they've also, the other strand is weaponry, right? Up there, they're all wearing, bandoliers covered with bullets. There's a strand in among the intellectuals in the bottom, right? They're all holding objects associated with the arts or with learning, right? And the clear binary in the painting is the opposition between the workers and the intellectuals, right? They're clearly the things that are supposed to be regarded as opposite here. And the painting seems to favor the worker side of the binary, right? Gives them the power and makes the intellectuals look ridiculous. But then does anybody remember what the anomaly in the painting was? What was weird about the painting?
The old guy had a.
One of the intellectuals was looking at you.
Yeah, the old guy with the funnel on his head holding up the wand, right, is the only one in the painting who's looking directly at us, right? The most ridiculous, the most absurd figure in the painting is the only one that's making direct contact with the viewer, right? So in a painting that's clearly in greater sympathy with the workers than with the intellectuals, the anomaly, right, is that it's one of the intellectuals, and the silliest of the intellectuals, who is actually making human contact with you, right?
Is he trying to say that he's self-aware? Or whatever?
Well, I mean, you could interpret it in a number of different ways, right? The only thing I'm trying to point out here, right, is that is something, that's something that's worth exploring, right? This one weird little thing in this painting, this one weird detail in this painting, is something you could actually probably write a whole paper about. And I'm sure some art historian has. Right? That these are the sorts of things you should be on the lookout for, and you should be asking yourself when you see something like that, right? What is this doing here? Why is this in here? And how does this change the way I read this text or this painting? So look for the weird stuff. Now, in order to help you a little bit with the homework assignment you're working on right now, the one about Aztec philosophy, I want to make sure that you guys sort of get this and get how to do this and get what I'm asking, because my other section got a little bit confused about this. So,
Yeah, I've already turned mine in.
what's that?
Yeah, I've already turned mine in.
Well, I'm only going to read the one that's turned in most recently, so if you want to redo it, it's okay.
Okay.
So what I'm looking for here, I'm not looking for you to agree or disagree with the article, right? That's not the point of the assignment. I don't care whether you agree with the author or not. That's immaterial. What I do want you thinking about is what assumptions is the author making about his subject and about his audience. Right, so there are certain ways we can tell what level of knowledge about a topic an author actually expects you to have, right? And this can give us some clues as to who the text is actually written for, right? Do any of you know what the word jargon means? What's jargon?
Like slang?
It's not slang. It's similar, like a slang is usually kind of like the specialized language of a particular subculture, right? Like a particular social group will have their own way of talking, right? Their own vocabulary that's particular to that group, right? So jargon is similar to slang in that way, but jargon is specialized professional vocabulary. So, like every different career field or academic field has its own jargon, right? So, medicine and nursing have a particular jargon, chemistry has a particular jargon, business has a particular jargon, literary studies has a particular jargon, right? Strands, binaries, anomalies, that would all be part of my jargon, right? The literary studies jargon. So, if the author of an article is using a lot of jargon, is using a lot of what appears to be specialized professional vocabulary. What is he assuming about his audience?
That they're
That's a
familiar with that
professional
use,
Yeah, exactly. That they know the jargon, right? That they're of the same profession.
like an
and of the
inside
same-
joke.
Yeah. It's not for outsiders, right? It's not for people who aren't already initiated, right? Who didn't already drop the psychedelic mushrooms. So, if an author is using a lot of jargon words and not bothering to define or explain them, this means they expect that you already know these words and are already part of the field, right? Now, if they are using a lot of jargon and taking the time to explain and define it, then what does that suggest about the assumption they're making about the audience?
They don't expect you to know what you're talking about, and they're trying to reach out to everyone.
Yeah, they're expecting at the very least, right, that you're a novice in the field and that you maybe don't know the jargon yet, you maybe don't know the specialized language yet, and that it needs to be explained to you. Now, if there's no jargon whatsoever, then it's clearly just intended for a general audience, right? But yeah, if there is jargon and they're bothering to define and explain things to you, then they can make the assumption. They're making the assumption that this is for novices, right? People who are going to move further in this field, but need to know need to know the vocabulary. They need that grounding, right? So, things you're going to want to think about as you read this article, right? One, to what extent does this author use jargon? And if he uses jargon, does he explain it? And what does that suggest about you? Now, you're also going to want to focus on particular key words, right? Whether they're jargon or not. In large part because we tend to think of language as transparent, right? That words always mean the same thing whenever we use them, whoever's using them. But we often need to infer from context, right? What particular words often mean. It's not always really clear to us why particular words mean what they mean. To give you an example of this kind of lack of clarity in language, I'm going to present to you here a binary. Now, are these terms that we usually think of as describing opposite political positions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pro-life and pro-choice, right? Is there anything weird about that?
Both of them say pro.
Yeah. If they're opposites, what would we expect them both to be pro something? What does pro mean?
For.
It means I'm in favor of this, right? It means I'm pro something. So what would you expect if they're supposed to be opposites?
Pro-choice, dis-choice.
Yeah, or pro-anti, right? Or, pro-con. You wouldn't expect both of them to be expressing a positive. So both of them express a positive. And are life and choice things we think of as opposites?
One would just go in with the other. In life, you have choices. So it's like
Yeah.
saying,
In life you have choices, right? But they're not opposites, right, is the point. So why then do we frame this particular argument in this way? Why do we say pro-life and pro-choice rather than saying pro-abortion rights and anti-abortion rights?
Because that doesn't roll off the tongue as easily.
It doesn't, right? But there are reasons for this. You're talking about something that makes people uncomfortable, right? Even if even if you are politically pro-choice, it's often something that people don't really want to talk about or discuss. And so you mask the real issue under terms that are unambiguously positive, right? Pro-life Everybody likes being alive, right? Sure as hell beats the fucking alternative.
Yeah.
And choice, right? People like to have choices. People like to make their own choices. Right, so we have here sort of two sides of a binary that are both expressing a positive that doesn't necessarily relate to the other side, right, of the binary. All in order to mask what it is you're really talking about. So we often think that what we mean when we speak is clear, when in fact it's kind of muddied, right? So what I want you to look for in this particular article is words that have sort of contested or contestable definitions. And I want you to think about how the author defines them. Which you're mostly going to pick up through context clues, right? He's probably not going to come out and tell you how he defines particular things.
Make things easier.
It would be nice.
Tell me what it means.
But that's the thing, right? You know, he probably assumes you understand what it means, right?
You have to assume that your reader's dumb. You have to tell them everything.
To an extent, depending on the level you're writing to, but yes. Yeah, for the purposes of this class, right, it's in general better to tell me more than to tell me less, right? It's better to assume that your reader, in this case your instructor, is an idiot who knows nothing about this topic, right? Show me how much you know about it for the purposes of this course. So, how does the author seem to define the keywords, and how does he think you would define them?
The same way as him.
He's okay.
Not necessarily. And that is actually sort of one of the key things that I want you looking for in this particular article, right? Is where is that mismatch between how the author defines certain central terms and how he thinks you probably do. Okay? All right, so let's work a little bit with the sort of these strands, binaries, and anomalies. I'm going to show you another comedy sketch, which of course I forgot to call up before class because I wasn't expecting to be here today. And what I want you to do in particular is pay attention to first, like, what the main binary is here. Like, what are the main oppositions in this particular scene? And then we'll think about sort of like patterns of repetition that are attached to each side of these binaries, okay? Just to get a little bit of practice with this. Are we waking up? We're waking up. Oh, good. And if we look at the binaries here, then this will actually, I think, tell us some things about some of our own cultural assumptions.
Hello, I wish to register a complaint. Hello, miss? What do you mean, miss? Oh, I'm sorry, I have a cold. I wish to make a complaint. Oh, sorry, we're closing for lunch. Never mind that, my lad. I wish to complain about this parrot. What I purchased not half an hour ago from this very boutique. Oh yes, the Norwegian blue. What's wrong with it? I'll tell you what's wrong with it, my lad. It's dead. That's what's wrong with it. No, it's resting, look. Look, my lad, I know it did hurt when I see one, and I'm looking at one right now. No, that's not dead, it's resting. Resting? Yeah, resting. Remarkable bird, the Norwegian blue, innit? Beautiful plumage. The plumage don't enter into it. It's still dead. No, it's resting. All right then, if it's resting, I'll wake it up. Hello, Polly! I've got a nice fresh cuttlefish for you if you wake up, Mr. Polly Ballon. No, he moved. No, he didn't. That was you pushing the cage. I didn't. Yes, you did. Hello, Polly! Wakey, wakey! Rise and shine! This is your 9 o'clock alarm call! Well, that's what I call a dead parrot. No, he's stunned. Stunned? Yeah, he's stunned just as he was waking up. Norwegian blue stunned easily. I don't have enough of this. That parrot is definitely deceased. And when I bought it not half an hour ago, you assured me that its total lack of movement was due to it being tired and shagged out after a long squall. Well, he's pining for the fields. Pining for the fjords? What kind of talk is that? Look, why did it fall flat on its back the moment I got it in? Oh, well, the Norwegian blue prefers keeping on his back. Beautiful plumage. Look, I took the liberty of examining that parrot. And I discovered that the only reason that it had been sitting on its perch in the first place was that it had been nailed there. Oh, and of course it was nailed there. I mean, if I hadn't nailed it there, it would have mustered up those bars and boom! But yeah, mate. This parrot wouldn't do if you put 4,000 volts through it. It's bleeding demise. No, it's pining. It's not pining. It's passed on. This parrot is no more. It has ceased to be. It's expired and gone to see its maker. This is a late parrot. It tasted bereft of life. It rests in peace. If you hadn't nailed it to the perch, you would be pushing up the daisies. It's run down the curtain and joined the choir invisible. This is an ex-parrot. Well, that will replace it. If you want to get anything done in this country, you've got to complain to no clue in the mouth. Sorry, Squire, I've had a look. We're right down the parrots. I see. I get the picture. I've got a slug. Does it talk? Not really. Well, it's scarcely a replacement then, is it? I didn't want to work in a pet shop. I wanted to be a lumberjack. I'm sorry, this is irrelevant, isn't it? Yes! A lumberjack! Leaping from tree to tree as they float down the mighty rivers.
Okay, so what's the central opposition here?
The parrot is alive or dead.
Okay, yeah, the argument, right, between the principles is over life or death, right? Whether the parrot is dead or alive. And why does this particular argument matter in the context of the scene?
Because he might want another parrot or his refund. And
Sure.
he doesn't want to give it to him.
Right, yeah, I mean, what's the relationship between these two characters?
Buyer and seller.
Yeah, customer and shopkeeper, right? Buyer and seller. And is that presented here as a complementary relationship or an oppositional relationship? Oppositional, yeah, because one's gain is the other's loss, right? If the parrot is alive, then the customer doesn't get a refund or a replacement, right? If the parrot is dead, which the parrot is clearly fucking dead, right? Then the shopkeeper has to give the customer a refund or something of equivalent value, right? That's how, yes, a slug. Does it
Big
talk?
old slug.
Yeah. Yeah, a slug is, I think we can agree, is not an adequate replacement for a parrot, right?
If you could ride it,
Yeah, that's what I mean, little thing is moving around slowly.
Yeah.
what if it's like a banana slug that's like, a foot long?
No, it's about actual slug.
Well, and I think the customer raises the issue here too. It's like, does it talk?
Well, not really.
No. Right? A slug doesn't talk, right? So, yeah, so the basic binary opposition here, right, is shopkeeper customer. Right? These are the two forces that are pushing against each other in this particular scene, right? And what do we notice is, what differences do we notice between the shopkeeper and the customer here? Apart from their difference over whether the parrot is alive or dead.
I was gonna say the accents.
Okay, their accents are different, right? Whose accent sounds a little bit more posh or refined?
Because
Yeah, the customer sounds a little bit wealthier, right? What else about the customer's language makes him seem a little bit more refined or educated?
He keeps like examples of death, and he keeps saying like ex
Yeah.
parrot, this is a dead parrot, deceased, morbid.
It's run down the curtain and join the choir invisible, right?
Keeps using
Snow
like
daisies.
Yeah, he keeps coming up with creative synonyms for death, right?
to get it through his head.
Yeah. So the customer has an advanced vocabulary, right? What about the shopkeeper's vocabulary?
It's very limited.
Irrepetitive.
He keeps talking about the beautiful blue.
he's
Yeah.
trying to pretend he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, and how do we, and this is maybe where we can find an anomaly here, right? What's our main evidence that the shopkeeper has no idea what the hell he's talking about?
He believes the parrot is alive.
Okay, well, for the one thing, he knows the parrot is dead, right? Yeah, he doesn't
Hope so.
want to admit the parrot is dead, right? Because if he admits the parrot is dead, he has to give the refund. He doesn't honestly believe the parrot is alive, right? I mean, we know he nailed it to the perch, for example, right? What does he call this parrot?
A blue, whatever it was called.
A blue Norwegian,
A Norwegian blue, right?
which parrots aren't from.
Yeah,
Norway.
We all know this, right? That parrots do not come from Norway.
Yeah.
No,
Okay, yeah, they do not. Yes. So yeah, he says, well, it's a Norwegian blue. They're pining for the fjords, right? Like clearly, this guy doesn't know where the parrots are tropical, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't know where parrots come from. So so the shopkeeper is full of shit. But yeah, his vocabulary is also limited, right? He keeps repeating the same things, right? He's resting. He's resting. He's pining, right? He can't come up with new things to say. What's the shopkeeper's strategy typically for dealing with the customer whenever the customer presents a new argument to him?
like he changed something.
He changes the subject, yeah. He comes up with some new explanation, right?
Why'd you nail it down? I would have broken the bars.
Yeah. And then how does he get himself out of the dilemma altogether?
He pretends to go check for another one when he just took.
He tries to give a slug.
Well, but then once it's clear that that's not going to work for the customer.
Said he didn't work at a pet shop.
Yeah, he's like, listen, mate, I didn't want to work at a pet shop, right? I wanted to be a lumberjack, right? Changes the subject completely, changes his clothes, and walks off set. So, yeah.
Want to be a
Yeah.
lumberjack all my life.
I mean, yeah.
If someone did that to me, I'd be like, I guess you win.
Yeah, I mean,
Or agree.
You can't
Like,
argue
you know
with
what?
that.
Me too.
yeah, I mean, who honestly comes out on top in this scene?
The shopkeeper,
The
because he doesn't give the
shopkeeper,
refund.
yeah, exactly, because he ends up not having to give the refund, right? The shopkeeper wins. So despite the obviously sort of superior class and education of the customer, right? This smarter customer clearly wasn't smart enough to notice that the parrot was dead in the first place.
Yeah, so he bought it.
And the shopkeeper's constant little distractions and deflections ultimately stop him from having to give the other guy a refund. So you can read this in a couple of ways, right? You can read this as a comment on, businesses' lousy customer service practices, and that, business really doesn't give a shit whether it sells you a lousy product or not. You could also read this as a scrappy, clever working class clerk getting the better of a snooty posh customer, right? So you can read this in terms of, a comment on business. You can read this in terms of, a comment on class. All right, I'm going to show you another quick example here. This is are any of you familiar with a show called Adam Ruins Everything?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna.
Weed.
Yeah.
Ruins me.
There's Adam Ruins Weed. There's Adam Ruins. In this case, voting.
The Electoral College.
Yes. I think there's also one on Adam ruining the suburbs.
Good.
That's right. Hell of the suburbs anyway. Okay.
Every 4 years, we hear the words Electoral College over and over again, but we never talk about what a ridiculous and, frankly, undemocratic system it really is. The Electoral College gives vastly more power to different voters depending on which state they live in.
Bigger states.
Nope, smaller states. If your state has less people, you have more power. Not too many people live in Wyoming, but they have 3 electoral votes, or 1 for every 135,000 voters. California is packed with people, but they have 55 electoral votes, or 1 for every 411,000 voters. And that's totally out of proportion, because it means it takes 3 times as many Californians to earn 1 electoral vote, giving voters in Wyoming 3 times the power in the Electoral College. As a result of this system, your vote could count for less just because of where you live. Infographics rule, right?
Yeah, well, it does seem unfair, but who cares if the Electoral College is kooky? I'm kooky. I have 2 turtles.
Okay, well, it gets worse because the Electoral College also creates swing states.
Oh, I love the swing states. They make election night so exciting, kind of like when my turtles move a little.
Well, exciting. I think the fact that the entire election is determined by just a handful of states is really messed up. For one thing, it means presidential candidates can ignore almost the entire country. Hello, America. I'm Adam Conover, and I'm running for president of Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. And boy, do I love Florida oranges, Philadelphia cheesesteaks, and whatever you people like in Ohio. The rest of the country can go suck a big one.
People in Ohio like LeBron James.
Who? I don't know many actors. Anyway, swing states have so much power that in recent elections, up to 80% of all the votes cast in America had no impact on the outcome. That includes your vote here in California.
Well, some states are red states and some states are blue states. That's the way America is.
Actually, most states are pretty purple. In 2012, over 3 million Texans voted Democrat.
I love barbecue, Blake Shelton, and abortions, y'all.
And almost 5 million Californians voted Republican.
Surf's up, y'all. You know what needs to go up? Border wall with Mexico, dude.
If electoral votes were awarded proportionately, in 2012, 16 of Texas's electoral votes would have gone to Obama, and 20 of California's would have gone to Romney. But in our winner-take-all system, anyone who wants to vote for their state's losing party might as well just stay home.
Oh, bummer.
Okay, everybody, get out. I can't listen to anymore.
How about we all vote?
Wait, who are all these people?
Oh, these are the electors. They're the people who actually vote for president.
I thought the Electoral College was just a name.
Nope. When we vote, we're actually just picking our state's electors. Then those electors get together and cast their ballots for president.
But who are they?
Oh, mostly retired politicians and party flacks.
I'm the governor's rich cousin.
Okay, Mr. Smarty, that's just a technicality. They have to vote for who we choose.
Actually, in 24 states, they can vote for whoever they want. And that's happened over 80 times. In 2004, an elector in Minnesota cast his vote for someone named John Ewards, which was almost the name of John Kerry's running mate.
Did you mean John Edwards?
Yes. I may have a drinking problem.
That actually happened?
That actually happened. That elector's vote didn't go to John Kerry. It went to the guy running for vice president. The Electoral College is such a bad system, people have been trying to abolish it for centuries, but so far it's been politically impossible.
Okay, well, thank you for the information. I cannot believe our beautiful system has become so messed up.
Oh no, the Founding Fathers designed our system this messed up.
All right, hold on a minute, young man. You do not talk about the Founding Fathers like that. They were brilliant men who fought hard for my right to vote.
Actually, the Founding Fathers didn't think you should be able to vote at all. Or me. Or most Americans. Let's go back in time, and I'll prove it to you.
Okay, so what is it that this piece wants to get you to believe? What's the basic argument it's trying to make?
The Electoral College is really bad.
Yes, the Electoral College is bad. Why is it bad?
Because it gives power to certain people and more power to other people than
Yeah.
it should.
So, theoretically, in a democracy, right, everybody's vote is supposed to count for the same amount, right? You know, one person, one vote. But so the basic argument he's making here is the Electoral College is bad because it's an undemocratic system, right? That gives more power to some people than to others. So whatever it is, the author of a piece wants you to believe, right? We call this the pitch. Right? This is the basic argument they're trying to make, the thing they want you to come away thinking. The complaint is the specific situation to which the pitch is a response. Right, so what would the complaint be in this instance? What is the specific situation?
That our vote doesn't count?
Pardon?
That our vote doesn't count?
Yeah, most of our votes don't count for anything, right?
80%?
Yep. Most votes in presidential elections don't count. We also need to try to historically contextualize any particular text that we read. And so we do that. We call the historical context in which the text is operating the moment, right? So what would be the moment for this, right? What's the context for this? If I tell you, for example, it's produced in 2016, what is the specific historical or cultural moment that this is responding to?
When Obama won his second election?
In 2016?
More than that. Well,
Trump. Well, he referenced Obama and Romney.
Right. That was 2012, right? So yeah, but yeah, 2016 was a presidential election year, right? So this particular issue is particularly relevant in a presidential election year, right? Now let's look at the way the argument is structured, because I think there's a lot being signaled here that the creators of the piece didn't really intend. What are the basic binaries that we see here? What are the basic things we see in opposition to each other?
Well, you got Democrats and Republicans.
Okay, but does the piece actually really seem all that concerned with differences between Democrats and Republicans? Yeah, it's not. it's not political in that way, right? It doesn't seem to be coming down on one side or the other in terms of party politics. Pardon?
Mostly like parody.
Yeah, it's neither party is treated fairly in states where it happens to be the minority party, right?
Mm-hmm.
Neither party has a fair shot if it's the minority party in a particular state. So where else might we see important binaries here? If we just look at our two main characters here, what differences do we notice about them?
She believes that the Electoral College was created for
Uh-huh.
our right to vote, while he believes that
He's actually
it
gonna be-
doesn't make no sense of having the Electoral College.
Yeah. So I think one thing that you know, there's he and she, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a male-female binary here. And which one is depicted as having all the answers?
The male.
The man has all the answers, right? Right. There's something that comes off as a little bit mansplaining about a lot of this, right? We have this, this guy who is constantly correcting all of the misconceptions that this woman has. Now, right, he has the answers, right? And she tends to express conventional wisdom, right? Or conventional thoughts, right? What people typically think about the electoral system, right? And what he is trying to do is show that her conventional wisdom is flawed. Now, what else is different about these two figures? How else is the man different from the woman here?
The way they're dressed.
Okay, the way they're dressed, right? How's she dressed?
More casual.
More casual. They're kind of like your NPR-loving ex-hippie grandma, right?
Yeah. I don't know what NPR is.
National Public Radio.
Oh, okay.
What about him?
Suit.
Yeah, sort of business casual. He's wearing a suit jacket, button-down shirt, no tie, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, he's dressed a little bit more formally. What's the big difference, apart from gender, between the two of them, though?
The age.
Yeah, the age difference here is important, right? There's a young-old binary here, right? The young guy has the answers. The young guy knows how things work. The young guy's done his homework and done his research. The older woman, on the other hand,
Kind of about what people say.
yeah, it's just been going with the flow, right? It's just, this is what people have always said, what people have always thought.
Like the founding fathers that she, and he was like,
Yeah.
they didn't even want you to vote
Uh-huh.
at all.
Yeah,
One landowner.
Right.
yeah, most of
White
yeah,
males.
yeah, most of us most of us in this room, myself included, would not have been able to vote in the early republic. I don't own any property, but right. So so these are the two major binaries we're really dealing with here, right? Youth and age, and male and female. Right, that's the way this is structured, that's the way this is set up. Yeah.
Was the male and female like on purpose, or was that just like what happened? Like,
Yeah.
because I don't really
Mhm.
think that like.
Yeah, and I would say probably not, right? It's probably not on purpose. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect the way we read it, right? Particularly if we look at the way he responds to her, right? Every time she says something, what does he come back and do? Like, what's the first word out of his mouth?
Actually.
Actually, right? Doesn't it piss you off when people do that?
I do that to people.
Let me have my answer. Or well, correctly.
I do that to people
Mm-hmm.
all the time.
But yeah, the point is like he's constantly interrupting her telling her that she's wrong.
Well, if she is, she is.
She is wrong, right? But there's no particular reason why the foil in this video had to be an older woman, right? Could have been anybody. They could have chosen anybody to represent ordinary conventional wisdom. But they didn't. I'm not saying that this, it was an intentionally sexist choice, or that it was, an intentionally ageist choice. But the video ends up coming off that way regardless. Right? Because she's always wrong, and he never really lets her get a word in edgewise, right? She says something, he turns around, he's got a finger up actually, and tells her why she's wrong. Right? So there is also, I think, a sort of fact over feeling binary at work here. Right? I mean, that what matters are objective facts, and that most people are not familiar with objective facts regarding voting. But yeah, there are some reasons to be concerned about the way the argument is presented, right? That's what I'm trying to point out here. And, and I want you to pay attention to the way in which arguments are presented. Right? This is stuff I want you thinking about. Okay, so we are about out of time. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
Where do we find the article on the Aztecs?
I sent it to your radar email.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So everybody should have it. If you don't have it, let me know.
About did you want us to say anything about the picture or just the article?
Pardon?
Did you want us to say anything about the?
Oh, the picture that's included in the article?
So is that significant what we're discussing?
No, just focus on the article.
Okay.
Yeah. The picture is just from an Aztec manuscript.
Okay.
It wouldn't be